And we're starting that right now. There you go. And the recording will be shared out after the call. I think it'll be posted with UMKR and with MFSA, so you can refer back to it or share it with folks that weren't able to join today. So that'll be a great way to continue to reference this call in the future. Does anybody have an objection to, at some moment when I'm not talking, I might want to take a photo of the group? And so if you have an objection for taking that photo, or for either MFSA or UMKR sharing that photo, just mention that in the chat. Otherwise, if not, then you don't have to mention the chat. But
hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Alex. Great. If you can mute yourself. Great.
Okay. I guess you can hear me.
Yep.
Welcome.
Welcome. So many of you probably know about MFSA, but I was just going to share really briefly a little bit about MFSA. We're a multi-issue intersectional social justice organization. We've been around for quite some time, since 1907. We were actually created as an action of the General Conference of the Methodist Church. We were the original social justice advocacy organization in the denomination. We wrote the first social creed, which is the basis for the current social principles. And this first social creed was based entirely on labor rights and became the foundation of the US's first labor rights in this country. During the MacArthur era, MFSA was accused, like many of other organizations, of being communist. And actually, the executive director at the time was called to testify before the House Committee on Un-American Affairs. And so after this, the denomination really distanced itself from MFSA, and then we became no longer the official advocacy organization. And then, later on, the Board of Church and Society was created. But the Board of Directors at that time, I think, made a really, really bold decision and recognized the importance of having an outside social justice agency working to call the church to be its best self. And so today we continue to do that work of shining a light on injustice and organizing justice-seeking people of faith to make change. Something that we're really engaged in right now, we're currently working in our beginning stages of doing an organizational racial audit of MFSA. We know that we're a white-dominated organization that exists within a white-dominated denomination in a white-dominated nation. And we're seeking ways to disrupt our own ways that we perpetuate white supremacy. And we're hoping to better live into our vision of becoming an anti-oppression organization. And that's one of our big priorities for this year. You can stay connected with us by following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is #MFSA Voices. And we have a monthly newsletter that has all sorts of information about all sorts of different things, different advocacy work. You can sign up for that if you don't already receive it. I will put the link in the chat so you can check that out when you have time. One piece of housekeeping is that during this call, we played around with the chat. If you have questions that come up, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat anytime. They'll be there. And so when we get to that portion of the call, we'll be able to field those questions through that. So that's how we'll be doing questions. Now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, John Wagner, who is one of the co-chairs for UMKR. John?
Greetings, everyone.
Hi.
Can you all hear me? Wave if you can hear me. Okay. So good to greet you this way. It's many of you I know, and a lot of you I don't know, and I want to greet all those who are part of the movement in the United Methodist Church to seek justice for Palestine, as well as those who are curious about this issue, as well as those who are delegates to the next General Conference next year. So I greet you in the name of the Lord. Just so good to be with you. I'm a United Methodist pastor myself, and I work with United Methodist for Keizer Response along with my co-chair, Lisa Bender, who is also on the call. I'm going to introduce each of our speakers. We are going to focus on the impact of the COVID-19 epidemic as it impacts the Holy Land, Palestine, Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, etc. So I will introduce our speakers, and I'm so pleased to have them here with us. And I saw that they are all here. The first will be Angleena Keizer. Angleena is currently working with our Methodist Liaison office in Jerusalem. She is a British Methodist, served churches in England and also in Sri Lanka. She was a missionary and has done mission work, of course, now here in Israel and Palestine. She's just a very energetic person, somebody we've really enjoyed getting to know. I certainly have enjoyed getting to know, met her just last November. The second speaker will be Reverend Alex Awad. Many of you know him well. He's a longtime friend of mine. He was a refugee, made a refugee in 1948, and comes from a strong Christian family who maintained hope and persevered in the face of adversity. Alex has degrees from a number of U.S. universities, including Asbury Theological Seminary. He has been a United Methodist missionary himself, former dean of students at Bethlehem Bible College, and pastor of a church in Jerusalem, the International Church there. And so we're so pleased to have him here with us. And then finally, Tina Whitehead, who is has just recently come back from Palestine. She is a missionary sent by the Western Pennsylvania Conference. She has worked with educational opportunities to set up visits with Palestinian families. She's worked with the Sabeel organization, Christ at the Checkpoint. Kairos Palestine has just been active with so many different organizations and has been active in many different ways as an advocate for this issue. And she's also been a delegate to General Conference. So I'm pleased that she's here with us, can share that perspective as well. We're going to start with Angleena to talk a little bit about her work, and then also how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted where she is, mainly Beit Jala and the West Bank. And I'm going to ask her to start now. Angleena.
Hi, can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Bridget, for the welcome, and John for your introduction. It's really great to be with you all, and thank you for inviting me to share with you this evening. I'm a mission partner with the Methodist Liaison office in Jerusalem, but I live in Beit Jala, part of Bethlehem area. And we work with various different organizations, United Methodist Church, advanced projects, through some advocacy. We work with groups that come. We work with the various projects within the West Bank and Gaza, and also with volunteers. And it's a great joy when we have volunteers from the Methodist Church that can come and be part of the ministry of the MLO here in the Holy Land. So I'm just going to share what it's like to be here now during the pandemic and what the implications are for the people here in the West Bank. So where I live in the West Bank in Beit Jala, a part of Bethlehem, when the COVID-19 broke out, one of the things that really inspired me and I was surprised by, but I shouldn't have been, was the way that the PA authority dealt with it. Obviously, we know that the West Bank is being under occupation and lockdowns for lots of different reasons. And here we're facing a different reason with the COVID-19. And when it broke out here, it was originally through a group that was staying here as a tourist group, staying in the Angel Hotel in Beit Jala. And when they returned to Greece, they were found to be infected with the virus. And so the Palestinian Authority responded very, very quickly, immediately as they heard the news. The Angel Hotel went into lockdown with police guarding and the Palestinian army that were guarding it 24/7. The staff were amazing at the hotel, and local businesses and various different organizations supported and gave food in different ways, the normal Palestinian hospitality that was given to the groups that were already staying and still in quarantine in the Beit Jala Angel Hotel. So they did an amazing job, and people, the Palestinians, responded very, very quickly because they're used to it. And they actually, one of the things that was highlighted was the way that the people responded to the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinians had a great respect in the way that the Palestinian Authority dealt with the lockdown. And they were, I think, in the beginning, the second country to respond well to the virus. And one of the things that they did was not only to do lockdown and a state of emergency on the 5th of March, we're still in a state of emergency, by the way, but what they did was when they locked down the area, they didn't just lock down the whole area, they locked down the suburbs. So Beit Jala was on lockdown, Beit Sahur and Bethlehem, which meant that we could not move within Bethlehem area itself. So each area was isolated. Where I live up the top of, on the outskirts of Beit Jala, which is near Hope School, if those of you that know it. And of course, when it means lockdown here, it means that the police are on guard, the soldiers are on guard, people don't have the freedom to move. Huge blocks of concrete were placed in strategic roads to prevent people from moving, not only locally, but coming into Beit Jala, so that other areas and people from the West Bank weren't able to come in. So the implications for me was, and for other Palestinians that are living here, was where we live, it's Area C, and so it was difficult to be able to get past the police checkpoints, the Palestinian police checkpoints. So in the beginning, when I needed to go to the pharmacy for medication, they said, you've got 5 minutes, after asking me lots of questions. When I returned, they asked and wanted to see what had I actually bought. They were so strict, and they're still strict in restrictions and in restricting in movement. But whereas lockdown is always a negative effect, to their advantage, it was a positive effect in keeping people safe, keeping the numbers contained. But there were concerns because we know that many people, like all over the world, have been affected by their jobs and job losses, particularly the tourists. The tourists had to leave, all the buses had to be out, coaches had to be out by a certain time. And so everything was closed down, like everywhere else. One of the big issues that affected the area and the West Bank is not only the tourism and the economy through tourism, but also construction workers and agricultural workers that work in Israel. So Israel was seeking for their workers to continue to work in Israel with an understanding with the PA that they would be given medical care by their Israeli employers if needed, and that they would return not before 2 months. However, we know that this month has been a month of religious festivals for Christians, Easter, for Ramadan now for the Muslims, and of course Passover for the Jews. So when it was the Jewish festivals, the Palestinians had to return back to the West Bank. Unfortunately, majority of them were not looked after by their employers, and of course there has been, you may have seen some images on the YouTubes where people have been dumped by their Israeli employers at checkpoints and not been taken care of. So that created an issue where numbers for the virus that had been contained started to go up within different areas of the West Bank as the workers returned back. So now we're into our 3rd month of lockdown, which will take us up to the beginning of June. And we have just been declared, Bethlehem area has just been declared on Sunday to be COVID-19 virus free. However, the reason why we're still in lockdown, I believe, is that they're wanting to restrict Muslims from celebrating and gathering together in huge gatherings for Ramadan. So last week, restrictions were lifted. There are shops that are open on certain days. People have to wear a mask or they will be fined. And there are no restaurants opened or anything like that, only deliveries, takeaway deliveries. Now, when I say that people really respected the PA, yes, they did, but like many places around the world, people have started to get frustrated. They're starting to, as time is going on, to see that they feel that it's political, as often is the case here. And so there have been quite a lot of issues that have brought up. For instance, there have been Israeli settlers, according to an OCHA report, that have been in the West Bank in the south of Bethlehem, where there have been many cases of more violence during lockdown by Israeli settlers, and also 450 olive trees uprooted. So people are starting to get frustrated. They're getting frustrated and kind of blaming that it's on a political issue. So I would suggest, if you can, keep praying for us and for the people, and encourage people to come back, especially next year, as tourists, and build and help to build up the economy back here in the West Bank, particularly in Bethlehem. Hope I'm not
I have to congratulate you, Angleena. That was exactly 8 minutes, which was what we were allowing each speaker. So the rest of you have to model that behavior. Thank you very much. We'll have questions for these persons at the end after they've all spoken. And you can record a question in the chat box and we'll try to get to it. I promise you we will. Okay, what's happened here? Are we losing people? All right, I'm going to call on Alex. Oh, I see. We're getting the graphics. Thank you, Belinda. We have, I'm sorry, Bridget. We have Alex Awad next, and Alex, your turn. Take it away. Can you unmute, Alex? Can we unmute for him?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was saying thank you, John. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Methodist Federation for Social Action. Thank you, United Methodist for Kairos response. And thank all of you. I see faces of wonderful friends for many, many years. And it is wonderful to see you. And since I am talking about COVID-19 and Gaza, I want to recognize a special friend, John Engel, who is Reverend John Engel, and who was my colleague. We both taught at Bethlehem Bible College's center in Gaza. John, it is so good to see you, and it's so good to see every one of you. I also see Kristen Brown, who had for many years who have been a missionary in the West Bank. So it's good to see really all of you guys. So my connections in Gaza go for many, many years. As I just mentioned, I was a teacher at Bethlehem Bible College. We had an extension course, and most of the professors at the college could not go to Gaza because they have West Bank ID. But since I had an American passport, I was able to get, from time to time, I was able to get a permit to go to Gaza. And when I went there, I taught a class at the YMCA, where Bethlehem Bible College held classes. I was invited to preach from time to time at the only Protestant church in Gaza. Of course, there are other churches, but there is a Protestant church, a Baptist church in Gaza. I was invited to preach there. And also I worked with the Shepherd Society, and we did humanitarian work in Gaza. And so I really fell in love with the people in Gaza. And every time I had a chance, every time I got a permit to go to Gaza, I was very, very happy to go there and minister to my friends in Gaza. Now we'll move to the PowerPoint. For those of you who are not aware of what we are talking about, this is the map of Gaza. And Gaza is surrounded by walls from the north, the east, and the south, and also by the sea from the west. So it is totally blockaded, totally under siege. There are over 2 million people in Gaza, and they are totally under siege. That's why with the coronavirus, it is really a very, very scary situation. And this is what we need to take into account. Next, please. Okay, this slide will show you the distance between the West Bank and Gaza. John would know that to drive from Bethlehem to Gaza, it takes about an hour and 10 minutes, an hour 15 minutes. Of course, John would drive it faster than me, but that's.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
I know how you drive, John. But anyway, so approximately it's about 30 to 40 miles from the tip of the West Bank to the Gaza Strip. It's not a very long distance. Next, please. Okay, here I am working for the Shepherd Society in Gaza. And this is a refugee camp that was made immediately after the bombardment in 2014 when Israel bombarded Gaza. Next, please. Here you see these makeshift camps. After every bombardment, many families in Gaza lost their homes. The whole buildings collapsed because of the bombardments. And those who survived would go to these camps that were erected by the United Nations or the Red Cross, and Christian workers will go to minister to these people. Next, please. And this is a picture I took in Gaza, and you can see the aim of the bombardment was to bring Gaza back to the Stone Age. Next. And here it is. I mean, it's sad. It's sad what have happened in Gaza for so many years under a siege, where you know, so much bombing, so much destruction. Next, please. And the children in Gaza suffer the most. This is a schoolboy in Gaza, but schools were destroyed, hospitals were destroyed, the only water generating facilities were destroyed, electric generators were destroyed. I mean, there is no mercy to the people in Gaza during these bombings. And of course, many lives have been lost. Next, please. And there is a church in Gaza. This is one of the oldest churches in Gaza. And the person who took this church is with us here. Kristen Brown took this photo and several beautiful photos. But I put this to remind you to pray for the Christians in Gaza. I mean, pray for all the people in Gaza, but also don't forget the small Christian minority in Gaza. Next, please. This is the March of Return, where Gazans decided to march towards the wall, not with guns, not with weapons, not with knives, only with their voice and with burning tires to try to say to the Israelis, enough is enough. Stop this siege of Gaza. We want to go back to our homes. And the Israeli response, you can see it in the next slide. Next, please. So these unarmed, totally nonviolent protesters were showered with, gunfire from the Israeli jets, tear gas, poisonous gases, and it was a mess. Every week on Friday, these protesters will come back knowing that some of them will be killed, but it was totally nonviolent, but the Israelis did not care, killed many of them. Next, please. Okay, I will skip that now. We can leave that and I'll come back to it later. But I want to focus now on COVID-19 and Gaza. And please let me know when my time is finished because I'm a preacher. It's hard for me to know.
We're about at 8 minutes now. How about another minute or so, Alex, for the COVID-19?
Okay. Palestinians in Gaza face severe shortages of resources and medical personnel. Health officials warned that if the virus spreads in Gaza, containment and treatment under the Israeli blockade will be nearly impossible. Today, 95% of the population of Gaza lack the direct access to clean water. 1 million people rely on food aid to survive. 70% of young people are unable to find employment. As of the 7th of May, 13 cases of COVID-19 have been reported and confirmed in the Gaza Strip. The authorities in Gaza are doing their utmost to contain the spread of the pandemic. They know if there is a coronavirus breakout, Gaza's health system will be rapidly overwhelmed and unable to provide even basic care. And because Gaza is effectively an open-air prison, no one will be able to leave. So I will stop here because of time, but I'll be happy to answer questions about COVID-19 in Gaza later on.
Thank you, Alex. We're going to move to Tina Whitehead now, but I too want to greet Kristen Brown. This is about hearing from some of our mission personnel. We hope we'll have a chance to hear from Kristen sometime in the future. Tina, would you care to share now? You have to unmute yourself. Tina, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
I did. All right.
Okay.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the hard part of this is seeing so many faces I haven't seen for a while, and I just like to sit down and have a chat with everybody rather than a report, but maybe we can get in touch afterwards. I'm in a different position in terms of my being able to stay over there because I'm a tourist, and I've been a tourist for 14 years, 3 months at a time. So I don't have the ability to be able to stay any longer than the 3 months, twice a year. And unfortunately, my visa was going to end in April, and I had to make a decision on whether or not to stay illegally or head home. I'd come back in January to Jerusalem, and I was working with EO. As John says, I've been working with Sabeel and various other places over the years, but the last 3 years primarily with EO. Presently, I'm working with Naim Atik on his memoirs, and I'll put in a plug for his book, which we should have at the publisher by the end of next week. So if you're interested in Naim Atik's memoirs, please get in touch with me. It's a wonderful book. But I was helping out with the dinners in Beit Sahur with EO, taking the groups from the hotel in Jerusalem. The last dinner we had was March 3rd, and we expected to keep going. And on March 5th, I got an email from one of the hosts saying, they're done, we're finished. And that was the end of tourism. Everything just ended immediately. And Angleena has told you what that was like. Total immediately, buses had to be out, tourists had to be out. The EO staff were all gone by March 14th. The last group left around the 17th. I still wanted to stay till the 3rd of April, and I had planned to do so, but I heard from the State Department that they said everybody who was an American resident better head home or face a possibility of not being able to come home. So on the 20th, I contacted EO, got a ticket, and on the 22nd, I had to leave. I had planned to stay. My visa was till the 17th of April, and that just was too uncertain of a time to be able to risk it. The hardest part on leaving was that immediately everything started closing down. From the time I heard until the flight, people weren't allowed out of the old city, taxis weren't allowed to pick up people, buses were stopping. I didn't know if I could get to the airport. I had 3 different possibilities on Sunday to get to the airport, and one by one, each one of them had to cancel because they couldn't get out of their areas. The fellow who finally picked me up wasn't anybody I'd ever heard of. A Palestinian from Beit Safafa, who was a wonderful, loved him. We had the most wonderful conversation all the way to the airport. So I made it safely to a very empty airport, half full plane, to New Jersey, again empty. Just a few people going to Pittsburgh, which was my final destination. I was surprised that there wasn't any testing or questions at any of the airports, except have you been to China or have you been to Europe? And that was it. Nobody questioned anything, which surprised me. And then I was put in under a 2-week self-quarantine after I got home. East Jerusalem was pretty well locked down until, from that point, until about the 19th of April. And on the 19th of April, some of the shops were allowed to be opened again, but Ramadan started on the 24th. And because Jerusalem was more Muslim than Christian, the shops had to close down again. So there were 2 levels of closures, not just the virus, but also Ramadan. And Israel imposed restrictions during Ramadan that people had to be in their homes by 7 o'clock at night, were not allowed out till 3 in the morning, and all the shops had to be closed by 6 o'clock. And that stayed into effect until just this past week. I'm there every day via messenger video calls. So today I was on Saladin for 2 hours. I was talking to the managers of the educational bookshop. They can now stay open till midnight, and the people can stay out till midnight, although most of them go home for their dinner at 7 o'clock-ish. I sat outside today, outside Herod's Gate, until the cannon went off to end the fast. So, and then I came to you. And talking to the bookstore, they said they lost about 95% of their business during April. So they're busy trying to recoup the economic situation that Angleena talked about. Tourism is stopped entirely. Some of the hotels are being used as quarantine sites for the virus. East Jerusalem is kind of caught between Israel and the Palestinian Authority in terms of where do you find statistics about the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. And one of the centers for testing in Silwan was closed down by Israel because they said that the equipment had been provided by the Palestinian Authority. So they get caught in the middle. It's been very, very restrictive. You've got 3 levels of restrictions. You've got first the occupation, then you've got the virus, now you've got Ramadan, which so it's just one after the other. Things are starting to get back to normal. I was looking at people on the street today. Some wear masks, some don't. There have been fines up to this point. Whether or not they're taking a risk by not wearing masks, I don't know. But most of the people were not wearing masks.
Tina, are you just, I mean, I guess this would, I'm hearing a great deal of pain in the voices of everybody who's spoken so far. I'm sure this is impacting you personally. Just very briefly to close, what would you say your state of mind is right now?
I want to be there. I'm half here and half there. Tourism is such an unknown at this point that it's hard to wish and to know what to wish for. Even if they open it up again, what's it going to look like? What is social distancing going to look like on an airplane or on a bus? The fellow today told me he thinks that the planes will start flying again to Israel in September. The airlines I've read this week said October.
Okay.
But I say the same thing as everybody else. Come back. As soon as you can, come back. They need you there.
Thank you, Tina. Part of our purpose here, the major part, is to give you a chance to speak, not to speak, but to ask questions. We have a few in the chat box. I encourage you to use that. And Bridget is also on hand to help me keep track of those. I'd like to start with a question to Alex that was posed earlier, just about asking about potable water in Gaza right now, seeing as that's very important. And just a brief answer to that question, Alex.
Well, even before the COVID-19, I mean, the Gaza Strip lacked fresh water. And not only this, but with the COVID-19, one of the recommendations is that people need to wash their hands. Well, in Gaza, there is not enough clean water to cook and to drink, much less to wash people's hands and to have sanitation. This is why so many people in Gaza, in the West Bank, and around the world are scared for the spread of COVID-19 in Gaza, because if you don't have water, can you imagine? And if you don't have medicine, and if you don't have ventilators, and if you don't have hospital beds and facilities, how can you handle a pandemic? The good news is, until today, there are only about 13 cases of COVID-19 in Gaza. And the authorities there, yes, I would say it openly, Hamas authorities there is doing a remarkable job of containing the virus, and they are being very, very strict on it. And yeah, you can say, thank God, the virus have not spread in Gaza anymore. But if it does spread, Gaza will turn into not only an open prison, but an open graveyard. Got it.
Thank you, Alex. And the next question that I heard, I'm going to direct to Angleena, and that is, is Israel still quarantining people who fly in? Maybe a brief answer to that question, since you're on the ground there. And Angleena, you'll need to unmute yourself. Angleena, okay.
I believe that they are. I believe it's still 2 weeks quarantine when people fly in. And they've been quarantined, like Tina said, in various hotels within Jerusalem.
All right. The next question, thank you, Angleena. The next question could be to any of the three of you. I'm going to direct it first to Tina, and that concerns the medical capacity there with doctors and all of those in the areas where you've most served. Tina, why don't you go ahead, and then Angleena and Alex, if you want to chime in.
Well, I think before the virus, the medical facilities were taxed because the U.S. had taken away all of their funding from East Jerusalem in terms of the hospitals, and a lot of these are private funded hospitals. So there's been a real strain on hospitalization. I think the people are going to Israeli hospitals, and that is, like here, that means that people who need help for other problems. Like my friend today, he's having finally a test done tomorrow that he's been waiting for 2 months for cancer. He couldn't get into the hospitals because of the virus. So they've been overwhelmed. They really have been overwhelmed. The one good thing in terms of Palestinians is they've realized that so many of the doctors and the healthcare people are Palestinian. And I think this has given them a better status in terms of the eyes of the people there in Israel. They've needed the Palestinians through this virus.
Mm-hmm. Alex, you want to, I think we kind of know where it stands in Gaza, pretty poor medical facilities, but could you share?
I would like to turn your attention to a Washington Post report on COVID-19 in Gaza. It is under the title, Gaza is an open air prison as COVID-19 spreads. And then the title continues with, it's time to lift the siege. The article is by a person called Tariq Lubani, L-O-U-B-A-I-N-I. It's April 15th. And that article really just clarifies about the medical and health situation in Gaza. And just to briefly summarize the article, it says, you know, that the medical health in Gaza operates at 1/3 of any medical health anywhere else in the world. And that is even before the pandemic. And then if there is a pandemic in Gaza, and if the COVID-19 spreads in Gaza, there is no place for the people in Gaza to escape to, or even to go to for medical attention. So it's very critical. And the article ends up with saying that Israel needs to end the siege of Gaza, end the blockade of Gaza immediately. Otherwise, the Israelis, who are supposed to be the ones to take care of the healthcare in Gaza, they would be the ones to be blamed for any spread of the virus in Gaza. So I encourage you to read the article, because it really talks about how difficult it is for the medical situation in Gaza if the pandemic spreads there.
Thank you. There have been a number of general questions about the general situation. We'll get there to those as soon as we can. I want one more specific to the COVID-19, and asked if there had been, this is an issue we're finding with activists in many places, is that it's under the, because people are distracted, there's more oppression. And there was a question about settler violence, if that has increased since the COVID-19 lockdown. Angleena, do you want to start with that one, and any of the rest of you chime in?
Yeah, the report that came out that I saw today from OCHA, and we have heard on Bethlehem News, they have a daily radio, is that the settler violence has increased during lockdown. And in various different areas. So that has been a concern for many.
Okay. Any of the others of you want to say something about that, or is that pretty well sum it up?
I would say also, you know, adding to what Angleena have said, is that the settlers will take any opportunity to assault on Palestinians. And the pandemic gives them greater opportunity, because the Palestinians are like imprisoned, like Tina said, in many ways. They are imprisoned and they are quarantined. And so this is hate time for the settlers to do what they want, unfortunately.
I'm going to direct a question. Thank you. I'm going to direct a question to Tina. This is a more general question, and that is about the U.S. Embassy moving, what impact that's had on Palestinians and on how people view it. You're in contact with many tourists. Can you give us a short answer to that?
I'll give you a positive answer. It's not a positive situation by any means, but it has brought up the question so many times with people who really had not known anything at all. So many times groups will say, what do you think about the embassy moving? And that opens up a whole conversation with people. And they're surprised. They have no idea that it was not a good thing for the Palestinian people. I remember Angleena telling me what it was like in Bethlehem when it happened. It was total depression for the people. They almost canceled Christmas because it was such a depressing situation. But it has been good in terms of tourist awareness. They're aware of that if they're aware of nothing else. And so that opens the door for conversation, and that's been a good thing.
Okay, thank you. There's some questions about tourism, and maybe just, we are intending to dedicate one of these webinars just to tourism at some point, perhaps after the next one on the annexation. But just to comment on the tourist trade, and not only that, but some people really want to know how to affect better pilgrimages to the Holy Land. How about you, Alex? Could you just share that briefly?
Well, you know, I mean, when you think of the people in Beit Sahur who carve the olive wood for tourists, the tourist shop, the restaurants, all the businesses like in Bethlehem, perhaps 40% of the businesses in Bethlehem depend on tourism. So all of these people are out of job right now, and many of them are men, women with families, with children, and they don't have the social umbrella like here in the United States. They don't have a social security check coming to their address. And so they are actually out of money. And that is really terrible. And that's why I would say one thing good about tourism and going back with Holy Land pilgrimage and tours and fact-finding missions is to stand in solidarity with these Palestinians, help them, support them economically, but also open your eyes and see the situation as it is on the ground. Because unfortunately, the media here in the United States, the major media, will not tell us the truth about what's going on there.
Right. Thank you, Alex. We did have one person who'd like to speak, and since Alex spoke so highly of him, it's John Angle. John, I'd like you wanted to share something about education. Could you limit yourself to a minute? And then we can continue the conversation perhaps in another forum.
Yeah, sure. I was in Gaza and the West Bank in January. I was planning to go in March, but of course that was cancelled. No, just a comment about education. It's a very similar situation to during the Intifadas when youngsters were, kept from school, and that's been the case now, for since the beginning of the problem in March. I'm very concerned with the school in Gaza, the Lighthouse School in Gaza. That's been closed, but I understand that schools will be opening on August the 4th, which is earlier than normal, so that children can go back for a whole month to make up what they've missed. And then the school year will start again on September the 6th. That's been the decision of the Palestinian Authority. So I'm very impressed actually with the way in which the Palestinian Authority is operating in the West Bank with regard to all this, although travel, of course, is very difficult, although a friend of mine tells me that he's going to try and travel from Bethlehem to Zababdi at the weekend. Whether he's successful or not, I don't know, but that's what he's going to try and do. But the situation in Gaza is hopeful, I think, as far as education of the children are concerned, which I'm very pleased about. Situation with medical care, which of course we've talked about, is very much the same as it always is.
Thank you, John.
There is no problem, significant problem, with COVID-19 in Gaza at the moment. One of the benefits, perhaps, of being in an open-air prison.
Thank you, John. I'd like to return to go. I'm looking at some of your questions here. We won't be able to get to all of them. One that is actually from one of our United Methodist mission personnel, Janet Lar Lewis, asked a very practical questions for Palestinians who are stuck outside the country. Is there any idea when the bridge will be open for them to return to their families? I don't know. Tina, do you want to address that? You're muted.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I really don't know.
Okay.
I mean, they told me this morning that the airports would probably be open in about 6 weeks. So I don't know if that is in general than having people come back in. That's all I've heard.
All right, thank you. There is, I'm going to kind of wrap this up here, and a number of you have asked about next steps and then brought up other issues. We are intending to have webinars on some of these other issues. Specifically now, we're planning one, and that would be, let's see, help me out here, Bridget, next June 10th, we're having a webinar, is that correct? Okay, and that will be on
annexation
of Palestinian land in the midst of this pandemic, while there obviously people are having their minds drawn to other issues or to survival in some cases. There has been a plan and moving forward with annexation of certain lands in order to increase the size of Israel proper, to increase Israel's power within that region, to deprive Palestinians of their rights and their land. Again, this is a new development and has not received much notice. We will address that in this next webinar, so I'm not going to go there today, but I wanted to let you know. Lisa Bender has put on the chat box, and if you'll please take a look at that, future topics for our discussions and webinars, but please take a look at that. Seeing a long question here about, very important to talk about how schools in Gaza have limited means to provide online education. So that's been a particular distress in Gaza. If you'll go down to a comment in your chat section that was put out at 1:55, again by Lisa Bender, she has a whole list of things that you can do to help, about contacting U.S. Congress, signing some petitions that are available, contacting the Israeli government. We've seen they actually do respond from time to time, amazingly enough. There are webinars by various other groups, including Jewish Voice for Peace. And I'm going to leave this. And then one last comment I'm seeing is our Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is visiting Netanyahu today. And
I hope he'll stay there.
Yeah, okay.
We want him
Alex
to
is
stay
hoping
there.
he'll
We don't want him back.
Right. But talking about support of this annexation effort. So I hope you'll tune into that. This is the first for us to work with MFSA and UMKR, United Methodist for Kairos Response, is an organization within the United Methodist Church. It's like UMKR, it's not official. I mean, it's like MFSA, it's not an official organization. We've been around for about 10 years. There should be contact information for us. We welcome your questions and comments and suggestions. Those are very important to us. I'm going to toss it back over to Bridget now as we close down, closing on the hour here.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We have had a lot of questions here in the chat. And so, I think the best way, besides copying and pasting what you see in the chat, is to make sure you're getting communication from UMKR and from MFSA. So after this call, if you hop on to both of our websites and check that out and sign up to get those communications, then we'll be sharing out some more of this information about upcoming webinars, about things you can do, all that kind of good stuff. So I think that's the best way, and to also look at the chat. I'm also posting in the chat right now a link to some other webinars that MFSA is either hosting or co-hosting this week. So check those out. There'll be a call tomorrow hosted by the Oregon, Idaho MFSA chapter on immigration, and there's a call on Friday with Western Methodist Justice Movement and iChirp on Philippines human rights. So thank you all for joining us.
Bridget, I got one more thing, if you don't mind. I would deeply appreciate if any of you are delegates to General Conference. We do have legislation coming before General Conference on a number of these topics. Please feel free to contact us. You can contact me or Lisa or any persons on the steering committee. Alex Awad is on the steering committee. Please feel free to do that with your questions. There's no bad question, and we really do want to engage with you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you to show your mama.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.